News conference on the confirmation of Justice Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. Let's listen.
Going to the White House tonight for the official swearing in of Justice Kavanaugh, and with that, I'll be happy to throw it open.
Senator, yes, you said on Fox News asked about Merrick Garland. Do you ever see a situation in which one party controls the White House, one party controls the U.S. Senate, where we could get a Supreme Court justice nominee through?
Of course, but I mean, let's talk about exactly what the tradition is in a presidential election year when you have a Senate in the hands of one party and a White House in the hands of another. Presidential election year. It's what we had in 2016. You'd have to go back to the 1880s to find the last time a vacancy occurring in a presidential election year was filled by a Senate of a different party from the president. Philip, you also recall from 2016 that Joe Biden had volunteered. We didn't have a vacancy in 1992, a presidential year in which there was one party in control of the White House, a different party in control of the Senate. But Joe volunteered that if a vacancy occurred, they wouldn't fill it. You may also recall from our discussions in 2016 that Chuck Schumer and Harry Reid said 18 months before the end of the Bush 43 presidency that if a vacancy occurred, they wouldn't fill it. That's because there was a Democratic Senate and a Republican president. So what I did was entirely consistent with American history going back to the 1800s of what happens when a vacancy occurs in the middle of a presidential election year and you have one party in the White House and another party in control of the Senate.
Are you fearful at all that if one day Democrats take back the Senate that they could say to a Republican president, we're not going to do any nominations of any kind in any year?
Well, it could, but I don't think that would be sustainable politically because it wouldn't be a very good argument to make. I noticed one of the Democratic senators said if they got the Senate back this year, they would just not do any judges for the next 2 years. I don't think that works politically. People understood, I felt, in 2016, in spite of all the complaining by the Democrats, everybody knew if the shoe had been on the other foot, they wouldn't have filled the vacancy. I mean, it was everybody just smiled because you knew that if it had been a Democratic president and a Republican president and a Democratic Senate, they wouldn't have filled the vacancy.
Senator, what's your message to the people who are angry about this confirmation, the people who are banging on the doors of the Supreme Court, the people you say are in your face? What do you say to them?
Well, look, I have zero tolerance for the kind of behavior that Justice Kavanaugh was accused of. But I think it's important to remind everybody that there was no corroborating evidence. I was chairman of the Ethics Committee in 1995 when I investigated and later made the motion to expel from the Senate Senator Bob Packwood, who was chairman of the Finance Committee of my party, over these kinds of allegations. I said during the Roy Moore special election, I believe the women. There was ample evidence, multiple examples, over and over and over. So I don't think this means in any way that the Republicans or Americans in general condone this kind of behavior, but it must be proven. After all, this is America.
Would you say the country's overly divided at the moment?
Look, we go through these periods. We've had big fights over other things, and the country will be just fine.
What's the prospect for the midterms now, post-Kavanaugh and that fight? What does it mean?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We have noticed, by the way, some energy pickup on our side. I mean, everybody knows that the Democrats are quite energized. They have been for some time. We all know that they're anxious to send the president a message, so they're very energized. What I think this has done for us is provide the kind of adrenaline shot that we had not been able to figure out how to achieve in any other way. So we see that movement. I noticed On CBS yesterday, their battleground tracker poll had our candidate in Tennessee up by 8 points. I'd never seen a survey like that in Tennessee in recent weeks. So we think there's some evidence, Lawrence, that this is going to be very helpful to us next month.
Do you think that this will prevent you from facing another primary challenge in 2020?
Look, I did just fine in the primary the last time. I mean, I would remind you guys, I carried 118 out of 120 counties and won about 30 points. I'm not afraid of a primary. I think I've demonstrated against a pretty credible candidate. I knew how to handle that.
Well, no, you're not afraid of it, but do you think that you've such solidified support here?
Look, anybody can file. It's a free country, and I'm sure I'll have. One thing about being in the job I'm in, you get a lot of slings and arrows. Your approval rating takes a beating from time to time, and that's a good recruitment tool for the other side, and I'm sure that they'll be able to get a credible candidate, and I'll be ready to deal with it.
Senator, what do you think this means for your legacy? We looked at a situation where the court could have been a liberal court going into 2016. You made a big gamble on holding up President Obama's vacancy pick. What do you think this means for you? I know I talked to a lot of conservatives over the weekend who say this puts you in the pantheon of conservatism and that you've ensured the Supreme Court will be conservative for generations to come. How do you see history looking at you?
Well, it's hard to judge your own legacy, but I can say this. I think it's the single most important thing I've been involved in my career. I think putting strict constructions on the courts are the single biggest way you can have a long-term impact on the country. It's the only thing we do with their lifetime appointments. I love the tax bill. I like what we did on deregulation, but just as soon as the political winds shift, you can bet we'll be back at the tax code, depending upon who's up or who's down at any given moment. I always remind people that the 86 Tax Reform Act lasted 4 years. And so if you want to have a long-term impact, and obviously all of us would like to do that, the single most significant way to do it is judicial appointments. And my party's not been in this position all that long. You can go back 100 years, and only 20 of the last 100 years have Republicans had the presidency, the House, and the Senate at the same time. And so these opportunities have not come along that often for us. And I do think it is the most consequential thing that I've been involved in my time as leader.
On the other hand, some are blaming you for breaking the Senate and for killing democracy, going that far to say that. What about those who have the other view of what you've done? Well,
they can speak for themselves. There's nothing broken about our democracy. I mean, you've seen it on full display. We've had big arguments over a lot of important things. John Meacham wrote a wonderful book I would recommend to all of you within the last year called The Soul of America. And what he does is, did you read it?
No,
you should.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Yeah, I mean, it takes us through our low points. And one of mine that I would cite because it was the Democrats was Woodrow Wilson debuted Birth of a Nation, the debut in the White House, which led to the resurgence of the Klan in the 1920s here in America. So he kind of goes through the various low points in American history and how we recovered from. The country's going to be just fine. Justice Scalia used to say every 10-horn dictator in the world has a Bill of Rights, but what protects America is the separation of powers. And the geniuses who founded this country assumed that people would do the worst thing, and that's why we have all these different checks and balances in place. So the country's going to be just fine. I think a lot of young people who've not experienced other low points think that whatever problems we're having at any given moment are unique. Listen, this is nowhere near as significant as what was going on in the 60s. We were fighting our way through the whole civil rights issue and coming out in the right place. I'm positive and upbeat about the country. I know everybody isn't right now, but believe me, we're going to be fine.
The New York Times quoted you as saying to President Trump, you were not wavering, didn't want to waver from Brett Kavanaugh. I believe that they quoted you as saying, you're tougher than mule piss, was the quote that the New York Times used.
That's strong. Well, let me tell you why I felt strongly about it. Yeah, let me tell you why I felt strongly about it. You had a person's life being destroyed here. by unsubstantiated allegations. I thought we owed it to Judge Kavanaugh to vote. He wanted to vote. Imagine what withdrawal would have looked like. It would have looked like conceding the allegation. So I felt like we owed it to him and to the country to work our way through this. And I was always opposed to withdrawal. I'm not suggesting the president was in favor of withdrawal either, but the moment that everybody would have had second thoughts, obviously, was after Dr. Ford testified. She was very credible. And I did talk to the president after that, and my suggestion was, we both agreed she was very credible. My suggestion was that this is halftime. Let's see what it looks like at the end of the game. And after Judge Kavanaugh's testimony, I think everybody felt better about him and about our ability to prevail. And then we ended up having the FBI investigation. And the parameters of the FBI investigation were determined in my office Friday a week ago. I had the Senate Republican members of the Judiciary Committee there, plus Senator Collins, Senator Murkowski. And Senator Murkowski, Senator Collins, and Senator Flake basically agreed among the three of them what they thought the scope of the FBI investigation ought to be. And there were 3 points. Number one, need to be done within a week because he'd already been investigated 6 times in the course of his public career. Number two, we needed to talk to anybody that Dr. Ford mentioned. And number three, Ramirez. We needed to talk to Ramirez and anybody Ramirez mentioned. All of that was done within the 7-day period. And last Thursday, the three of them and lots of other members of the Senate of both parties went down and looked at the FBI files. It's one file. The reason those aren't copied is they're not the property of the Senate. They're the property of the executive branch, and it's highly confidential. But everybody who wanted to read the FBI report could, and many did. We stayed in all night Thursday, so anybody who wanted to read the FBI report could. That led to Friday's vote, and 2 of the 3 members who basically defined the scope of the FBI investigation decided to support Judge Kavanaugh because they found the supplemental FBI report, remember number 7, the 7th FBI report, convincing that there was no corroborating evidence.
You have talked about the in-your-face protesters. Are you concerned at all about your security or that of your colleagues?
I'd rather not talk about security publicly, but I think the tactics were very helpful to me in unifying our side. I think there were 2 things that inspired our people to confirm this nominee. One, presumption of innocence. There was no corroborating evidence. Number 2, the tactics were designed to intimidate. Look, I know the difference between peaceful protesters and people who are trying to get in your face and try to intimidate you and scare you. We've got a few experiences here in Louisville that you all have covered. I'm more used to it than most of the rest of my members are not subjected to that kind of thing. So I think those were the 2 things that really helped us succeed. And I think it was an important moment for the country. I know everybody doesn't see it the same way, but that's the way I see it.
Senator, I know you said that you thought Dr. Ford was credible. The president thought she was credible. But President Trump mocked Dr. Ford in one of his speeches. Many people who are sexual assault survivors say that sends a bad message for women across the country. What is your reaction to the president's comments mocking Dr. Ford?
I'm trying to think of how many times you've tried to get me to comment on presidential comments. Good try.
Maybe 3rd or 4th.
I want to make sure I understand about 2020. So 2016, I believe you said we're going to hold this open because it's a presidential election year. We're going to let the people decide, give them a chance to vote. And now, am I correct in saying that, well, since we have a Republican president and a Republican Senate, we could confirm the nominee in 2020? But
I just walked you through that. I'll go through it again.
yeah, I just want to make
The tradition going back to the 1880s has been that if a vacancy occurs in a presidential election year, and there is a different party in control of the Senate than the presidency, it is not filled. I just walked you through that a minute ago. So we don't know whether there'll be a vacancy in 2020. We don't know at this point who will be in charge of the Senate.
Right. But the key there is that the party is the Senate. And the party
That's been the tradition going back to the 1880s. And do I need to quote Joe Biden and
No.
Chuck Schumer again? Yeah, I mean.
And you think that's fair? You think that's
Look, it's practical. Think about it. There's no chance that an opposition party is going to, in control of the Senate, is going to fill a Supreme Court vacancy occurring in the middle of a presidential election year. And that's why it hadn't happened since the 1880s. I'll take one more if there is one. Lawrence?
The greatest thing that you've been, or your most consequential thing you've been involved in. You consider this your greatest victory in your time in the Senate?
Look, I think other people have to make those kind of observations. Obviously, I think the court project has been my number one project the last 2 years. 2 Supreme Court justices, 26 Circuit Court judges. It's been my number one priority. And so obviously I feel it's good for the country, the right thing to do, and I do feel good about it.
Have you been inviting Justice Kavanaugh to speak at the McConnell Center anytime soon?
Stay tuned. See you later.
Did you watch the football game, Senator? Did you watch the football game? Louisville?
Oh, goodness gracious. We're off the record now, right? You reminded me of the Ron Cooper.
Oh, no.
I mean, nobody's filming, right? They are.
We're still on. Everything's still rolling.
They're filming. I watch it on TV because I was still in Washington. Good.
All right, you've been listening to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell taking questions there from local reporters in Louisville, Kentucky. The questions directed at the speaker range most clearly on Judge Kavanaugh, although you heard at the end joking with some of the reporters about football. But the questions are surrounding Judge Kavanaugh and what could potentially happen in 2020 during a presidential election year, depending on which party is in control of the Congress and which party is in control of the presidency. Obviously, in 2020, leading up to that election, the Republican president will be in charge of the presidency. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the upcoming midterms, to see where we end up at the other end of that. But Mitch McConnell suggesting that Republicans are more galvanized than ever because of the way that they feel, Republicans, the majority leader, feel that the way Judge Kavanaugh was treated. And so he says that while there's certainly a lot of enthusiasm on the Democrat side, he believes that there is a lot of enthusiasm that has been generated over this battle over Justice Kavanaugh. So we're going to continue to follow what happens with the speaker, also with the majority leader, also with President Trump, who is on his way, as we speak right now, to Florida. Meanwhile, in Florida, the National Hurricane Center says Tropical Storm Michael is now a hurricane. Forecasters predict the storm will continue to strengthen as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico, and it's expected to make landfall by midweek in the panhandle of Florida or Big Bend. The state's governor declared a state of emergency in nearly 24 counties on Sunday. More than 5,000 National Guard soldiers are also on alert. So for more on the latest, we want to bring in CBS News weather producer David Parkinson. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Every time I see you, I know it's because we're going to be tracking a story